The Rio Olympics may be over, but for Brazil's embattled President Dilma Rousseff, the race to save her political career is about to hit a huge hurdle. Hello, I'm Arnold Naidu, and this is The Heat. She was suspended in May and formally indicted during the Olympics. But this Thursday, Dilma Rousseff faces the biggest challenge of her political career. That's when a trial gets underway in the Senate to impeach the Brazilian president on charges of breaking federal budget rules. Supporters call the campaign against her an attempted coup d'etat. Many of those behind the impeachment, including interim President Michel Temer, have themselves been accused of corruption. Regardless of the outcome, the country is in for a continuing period of political instability. Later, we'll talk with several experts about the ongoing crisis, but we begin with CCTV's Paulo Cabral in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And Paulo, what can we expect when the trial begins on Thursday, and what are the chances that Rousseff survives the attempt to impeach her?
Well, it's very unlikely, really, Anand. You know, it's 81 senators, and for Rouseff to be ousted permanently, it's needed the votes of two-thirds of the Senate, 54 votes then. So far, 48 senators have openly declared their votes to the media. They said they will vote against Dilma Rousseff. 18 senators have said to the media they will vote for Dilma Rousseff to return her to power. But actually, analysts say that this has to do with political negotiations going. There's ones that have not declared their votes, but the number of 54 will be easily reached, according to most analysts. The government of interim President Michel Temer talks about 62, 63 votes for their side. And actually, the last attempt of Dilma Rousseff to defuse her impeachment was to bring the idea that if she was returned to power, she would bring a referendum to anticipate the elections, the 2018 elections. So she was offering to be kind of a transitional government right now, but not even within her own Workers' Party. This proposal had too much, attract too much support. Actually, it seems that her Workers' Party has sort of dropped Dilma Rousseff and are thinking now about this year local elections, 2018 presidential elections, and above all, their long-term survival.
And Paulo, as I mentioned, the interim President Michel Temer has also been accused of corruption. What can you tell us about him, and what sort of policy differences can we expect if he succeeds Rousseff as president?
Well, a veteran politician, you know, he was a public prosecutor before he joined politics about 30 years ago. Very discreet, usually. He became the vice president of Dilma Rousseff because he was the leader of the PMDB, the biggest support party in Dilma Rousseff's coalition. But no one would expect him ever to run for president, for example. Unlikely that he would become president except in a situation like this one. Yes, there are allegations against him within the major car wash corruption probe, but these remain unproven, even though quite a few times his name was brought up in investigations. But now, what's interesting was that he was convicted by an elections court here in Sao Paulo in 2014 for elections crime. He would have donated too much money to the campaigns of his party, and because of that, because of this conviction, actually he can't run for elections for the next 8 years, meaning that he's likely to become the permanent president, the effective president next week because of the parliament, but he could not run for that position right now. As to what he's bringing from the economic point of view, not much has changed yet. He brought a finance minister with a lot of credibility, Henrique Meirelles, but he was not able to push yet with the most important reforms. His allies say that once the impeachment is over, once he's not anymore the interim president, but the effective president, he will have much more power to push with important reforms. But that would be a difference not with just the previous government, but with pretty much many previous governments that have been promising these kinds of reforms, like tax reform and pension reform, and never really managed to do it.
Thanks, Paulo. That's CCTV's Paulo Cabral reporting from Sao Paulo. Joining us here in Washington to talk about all this is Paulo Sotero. He's director of the Brazil Institute at the Wilson International Center for Scholars. Andrea Murta is Deputy Director with the Atlantic Council's Latin America Center. Joel Velasco focuses on Latin America as a Senior Vice President with the Albright Stonebridge Group, an international strategic consulting firm. And with us from Berkeley, California is Maria Luisa Mendonca. She teaches at the University of Rio de Janeiro and is the Director of Brazil's Network for Social Justice and Human Rights. Thanks to all of you for joining us. And let's start in Berkeley with Maria. And Maria, supporters of President Rouseff are calling this impeachment a coup, an attempt to unseat an elected president. What do you make of that? And what is the legal basis for this impeachment?
Yes, I think that not only supporters of President Dilma Rousseff, but many people who are not necessarily Workers' Party supporters, but are very concerned about democracy in Brazil, because we see this as a parliamentary coup in Brazil because there is no basis, no legal basis for the impeachment. Brazil is a presidential system, it's not a parliamentary system. So you cannot impeach a president because her popularity may be low at some point in her term. So you need to have a fact. And the Brazilian public prosecutor already said that there is no basis, no legal basis for the impeachment. President Dilma did not commit any crime. So that's the main problem, because we are undermining democracy. And even here in the United States, 45 congressional members, House members, sent a letter to Kerry asking him not to support the interim government in Brazil. And so we see also, even from Congress members here in the United States, that there is a growing concern about what is happening in Brazil. Because if this impeachment is approved in the Senate now, that is going to undermine all institutions in Brazil. The credibility of all institutions now are going to be at a risk, a serious risk.
Okay, Andrea, big question marks over this impeachment, depending on which side of the aisle you are in Brazil. How is President Rousseff responding to this? What can the president and her supporters do about it?
Well, she's making a political point right now. She understands that it's very unlikely that the Senate will absolve her of the alleged crimes that she has committed. It's the most likely scenario is that she will be impeached before the end of this month. And she's making a political, just signaling to people that support her or support the Workers' Party that she's still fighting, that she's insisting on her honesty and the fact that she didn't commit personal crimes of enrichment or anything like that. And I think that the Workers' Party is really looking into 2018. They're looking into their survival more in a medium term and a longer term to see if they can revive out of this very big confusion that Brazil has found itself in with some strength going forward, really.
Right, confusion is the word. This is a very complex case, especially for those who are outside Brazil. Joel, what are we to make of the fact that many of the politicians who are accusing this president of corruption, who are accusing this president of not carrying out her duties, are in fact themselves being investigated for far more egregious corruption charges? Even the interim president right now, Michel Temer, is under suspicion.
Well, I mean, I think it's clear here that there are a lot of bad apples in this basket. Right. But because that does not mean that we simply suspend the due process of the impeachment procedures in Brazil. And I think the country has spoken. The Supreme Court has had oversight over this. I think the popular opinion has seen every single session of the Supreme Court has been televised, which is, by the way, very different than what we have here in the United States. Every single session in the House and then now in the Senate is being televised, and everybody's having an opportunity to weigh in on this. I think light is shining on all politicians. President Rousseff may be one of the first to, let's say, be removed from office for this, but I don't think she'll be the last. The former Speaker of the House is likely to be removed following that, and who knows who else. Brazil has had a very strong experience, very good experience with impeachment in Brazil, and unfortunately, some people will criticize, say this is not a parliamentary democracy, but it is a democracy. It is part of our system to have impeachment in Brazil, just as it is here in the United States, and I think we're going to go forward in this manner.
Right, Paulo. It is a transparent process, as Joel points out, but I guess the question is, what's motivating it? Is it political or is it legal?
Two things. Part is political. Obviously, this is a political process. It's happening in the Brazilian Congress, and the political motive is very clear, and it is the fact that under Dilma Rousseff, the Brazilian economy was basically undone. Expenditures 10% GDP growth, enormous government intervention and of the bad kind in the economy, leading to the longest and deepest recession in Brazil's history, with the cost of 12 million jobs so far.
But not totally her fault. I mean, in 2011, we did see commodity prices drop. We did see demand drop from big consumers like China.
Well, everybody saw a demand for commodities coming down when other governments reacted in time and protected their economies. But there is a legal basis for this, and this is what the senators will act on. There are two charges regarding budgetary law that were breached, unauthorized expenditures, and the law of fiscal responsibility that exists in Brazil. Those are two of the 72 impeachable causes that a president may face in Brazil. So it's not something that is absolutely out of the blue. It is a painful process. It is an unfortunate process. This is the second time in 24 years that Brazil is impeaching and removing a president. So this tells something that something is wrong with the system, and there is a problem of, obviously, of systemic corruption in Brazil that is being confronted by a younger generation of judges, federal prosecutors, to be continued.
Maria, there have been charges and counter-charges as we've been hearing out of Brazil, and there have been revelations almost every week. One of the big ones that we heard in the past few months, in May, there were these audio tapes which were released, which seems to reinforce the belief that this was a politically inspired witch hunt, people going after the president. What can you tell us about those tapes and what was on them?
Exactly, it's very clear. The impeachment, the main objective is to stop investigations of corruption. President Dilma is not being accused of any corruption charges, but all the senators and the House members who support the impeachment are facing very serious corruption charges. So the idea is to get rid of President Dilma so they can stop investigations of corruption against themselves. So the most corrupt politicians now are the ones trying to impeach the president, who is not being accused of any crime. The Brazilian public prosecutor already cleared her of all charges. So we are seeing now a situation which is a political situation. You cannot impeach a president because there is an economic crisis in the country. When she was reelected in 2014, we had a situation of full employment. The economy was growing. There was a lot of investments in education, in healthcare, and now what we see just in a few months, the interim government that was not elected is already changing policies very quickly, cutting social programs, cutting investments in education, healthcare, job creation. So I think we're going to enter a situation of the worst economic crisis ever in Brazil, and we are not under a democracy anymore.
Joel, you want to respond to that?
Well, I mean, first, it sounds like my two kids where, well, you know, one's trying to blame the other and says, well, Dad, you know, you can't do anything to us. Well, two wrongs don't necessarily make her unimpeachable. Yeah. The fact is, she has been found by the Brazilian lower house to have committed, they've accepted those charges. And that includes certain violations of the law that are constitutionally impeachable offenses. The Senate is going to vote on this, just as it's stipulated in the Constitution, as we've done before, and the Supreme Court, as I said, has looked at this. To say this has no legal basis, I'm not an attorney, but every justice of the Supreme Court who's looked at this and others have approved it. And just in the last couple of days, what we've seen is the OAS, the Organization of American States, challenging, asking for this, and the Brazilian Senate and the House have submitted, you know, tens of pages of responses outlining every single step they have taken. Yeah. The biggest proof of this is that this is a legal process, is that Dilma is participating in it. She didn't stay, she could have stayed in office and says, take me out of here. This is a coup. When there's been coups, people tend to stay in their palace. Yes. She left, and she's been campaigning out there to try to save herself. And every day she continues to campaign, she's losing more votes.
Go ahead.
I think focusing too much on the legal aspects of this is the wrong approach. I think this is a black hole. There's a very strong case to say this is not justifiable legally, and there's also a very strong case to see that there are mistakes that have been committed that could be said that were against the law. I think, as Paulo said, this process is a political one. What happened to Rouseff was an erosion of her support in Congress, and a big erosion of her support among the voters as well. So it is a political process. She's basically being removed out of incompetence. I do think that it forces Brazil to take a very hard look into its democratic procedures. It is a systemic problem that we have. When we say that the institutions are going to be weakened, I think they already are weakened, and that's why we're seeing this, that we don't have as strong a democracy as we thought we did. And we're going to have to take a very hard look at this going forward to see how we can reform the system to make sure that our politicians are stronger, that our system is stronger.
Well, this will be a long process. The impeachment or the removal of President Rousseff is basically a done deal. The crisis really comes after that, where you have to control a fiscal situation that is very, very big. The deficits are enormous. They require structural adjustments that have to lead to a situation of economic growth while sharing prosperity. One of the merits of the period before now was precisely that Brazil was able for a while to find the path to growth while distributing income and growing its middle class. This is what the challenge is, but with this type of structure in the state that we have now, with the state costing much more than people are willing to pay, we have a problem. This will be confronted somehow. Whether we are going to succeed or not is a question mark at this point. But to go back to what Joe said, it's important. President Dilma Rousseff, on Monday the 29th, will appear before the Senate to defend herself, therefore giving legitimacy to the process. If this was anything similar to a coup or a parliamentary coup, she should have denounced this from the beginning, not defend herself, and just ignore the process. She participated in it, and actually, by the way, she by now has lost the support of her own party, because she offered the other day, if the Senate would spare her from removal from office, to call for a plebiscite about having new elections. And the president of the Workers' Party criticized that proposal, saying that this was not a good idea. So she is very isolated.
Okay.